We've got a controversial signing to discuss and some early season surprises, both good and bad. We've got all that and a lot more on today's Locked On NHL podcast.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Friday, everyone, and welcome to the Friday edition of the Locked On NHL podcast. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank everyone who makes Locked On NHL your first listen every day. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts so you never miss an episode. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. I'm Gil Martin from Locked On Islanders. I'm here every Friday with Rachel Donner of Locked On Flyers. Happy Friday, Rachel.
Happy Friday. Yeah, the season is underway, and it feels like we're establishing the ebbs and flows and rhythm of hockey again. It's not just like opening day kind of stuff now. Now we're in it. So
we're settling down, and yet there are still a lot of surprises, both good and bad, throughout the NHL. And it's been an interesting start to the season, but not without controversy. Got to ask you about this. Carter Hart signing with the Vegas Golden Knights. I know you watched him extensively in Philadelphia. Your thoughts about the controversy of this signing?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be frank. I don't love it. I think, to me, there is not a supreme right to play in the NHL. It is a privilege to play in the NHL, and he has not met the standards that I think are worthy of playing in it. Clearly, the Vegas Golden Knights disagree. They are welcome to do that and sign him and, let the quote unquote chips fall where they may, which is a good Vegas reference, I guess. But, that being said, it is interesting because, you look at the statement that the NHL made at the conclusion of the Hockey Canada trial, right? And my good friend Mary Clark at the For the Win from USA Today pointed this particular point out. And she said that, the statement says specifically, and in this case, while found not to have been criminal, the conduct of the players involved certainly did not meet the standard. And the standard being the league expects everyone connected with the game to conduct themselves with the highest levels of moral integrity. And, the league themselves said it doesn't meet the standard. Later they said, teams are welcome to sign them, but these players do not fit the mold that we want to present for the league. And I just find that interesting,
Yeah, it is interesting. I don't know how else, they could put it under the circumstances. They're trying to have their cake and eat it too, right? They're trying to say, you could sign these guys. We wouldn't be thrilled about it, but we won't stop you, kind of a thing.
Well, because the Players Association made us stink about it, right?
Right, and that's their job. That's
what happened. Exactly.
That rest assured, if the Players Association, if the NHL said, hey, you can't sign these guys, there would be a lawsuit. Whether it would be successful or not, there would be a lawsuit. And I think even the publicity from that kind of thing is something the NHL would be wanting to avoid.
Sure. And that's where you get wishy-washy statements from the Vegas Golden Knights saying, we remain committed to the core values that have defined our organization from its inception and expect that our players will continue to meet those standards moving forward. Well, what core values are they, Vegas? Truly, what core values are there? And so, I think I feel bad for people who either work in the building or for the organization that may have experienced sexual assault and, now have to work around that and have a reminder of it, in front of their face every day. I think that's not okay. But, I also think that, again, the Vegas Golden Knights technically have the right to do this. They're choosing to do it, and they're going to take whatever blowback they get, and they're clearly willing to do it. And, like I said, there's no law against signing them. So, as for Carter Hart, the goaltender, he's a good goaltender. He's not a great goaltender, but he's a good goaltender. And, Vegas has one solid goaltender right now, and I can see why they need somebody, but I also think there are other options out there that they could have done. So
yeah, no question about that. Now, Carter Hart and the other players involved in this incident are not eligible to play in the NHL until December 1st.
Correct.
So what is the plan between now and December 1st?
Right. So, he's been practicing in Vegas, and, he can do that. He can do some tune-up games at the AHL level starting November 15th in Henderson, which I'm sure he will be doing that. That is going to be, I think, the test of where the fan base stands on this in terms of who shows up to that game and what the response is. And, and then down the road, if he ends up playing in Vegas, because right now it is a PTO, and that would get converted into an NHL contract once we hit December 1st, right? And then we'll get like sort of the full terms of it at that point. But, I think time will tell, honestly. And I think, again, Vegas has decided that this is the path forward for them in that.
Now, the fact that it's a PTO, does that kind of give the Golden Knights organization an out? If
Probably.
For example, even if he plays well, but there's a big negative PR blowback, they can just say, hey, we don't want to sign him at this point.
I mean, that's up to them. And I think that's why they have this structure in place in terms of the timing of it. So I think this is just a wait and see. I mean, they're doing their best to spin it in the best way that they can. And, like I said, people disagree with me that he should be able to play, and that is their prerogative, and they can react accordingly.
Yeah, no doubt. Now, obviously, there are other players involved with this incident, and their future's also kind of unsure at this point. Have any others, how many others remain to be signed in any way, shape, or form?
I mean, it's very clear that Carter Hart's the only one that had a true potential of being signed in the NHL. Like, we already know that, like, McLeod isn't. So, I think this was really, honestly, the only one that was going to be a true test.
Yeah, well, we'll keep an eye on it. And then I guess from a hockey standpoint, he hasn't played competitively for quite some time. Will there be a rust factor involved with this?
Absolutely. I mean, you can't help it. I know that he has continued to train and practice. He was in Nashville for a while and did what he said, according to an interview with The Athletic, that he did sort of a regular off season of training this past summer with NHL players that were not named in that article. I think he said that the last month was obviously different because everybody went off to their training camps and he was kind of stuck by himself for the time being, but that he did a full regular summer of training. But that doesn't change the fact that he doesn't have game experience for quite some time, a season and a half ago at this point. And so there will be rust, and that's what the practices and the tune-up are going to have to be for, and they'll see how he is. And that'll be part of whether or not the PTO gets officially, converted into a full NHL contract.
I mean, obviously, if he doesn't get signed and he's the only player who has a realistic chance of being signed, that kind of puts the, eliminates the possibility of these players coming back into the league. We'll see how this all plays out, but obviously a lot of discussion and controversy surrounding that decision by the Vegas Golden Knights. All right, well, we are a week and a half into the season right now, and there are a lot of surprise teams and players, both good and bad. We're going to talk about that and a whole lot more coming up on today's Locked On NHL podcast.
Hockey season is officially here, and nothing beats being in the arena for those opening games. But let's be real, getting tickets can sometimes be a headache between waiting in online queues, surprise fees, and prices that jump right before checkout. It's easy to get frustrated when all you want to do is cheer on your team, and that's where Game Time comes in. It's the app that gives fans the advantage. It's your ultimate life hack for scoring amazing NHL tickets fast, easy, and stress-free. One of my favorite features of the app is you can see exactly what your seat view looks like before you buy the tickets with that feature in app. The zone deals are also a game changer. You pick this section, Game Time picks your seats, and you can save big. You can even find NHL tickets for under $25. I recently used Game Time to grab seats for a Lorde concert at Madison Square Garden. It could not have been simpler. I had great seats in minutes. Take the guesswork out of buying NHL tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. That's code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go.
So here we are, 4 or 5 games into the season for most teams, and already we've seen some surprise teams, both good and bad. Let's start with the Seattle Kraken.
Yeah.
I mean, 4 games in, no regulation losses, 2-0-2 on the season, winning both their home games and overtime or shootout losses in both of their road games. How surprised are you that the Kraken are where they are this early in the season?
Yeah, I think it's really great for them that they're off to this good start. I think that, it is interesting because, their scoring is solid. Their defense still isn't quite there, right? As expected, right? But they're getting enough scoring to overcome that to a large degree. The other interesting thing is that it's very home weighted, right?
Yeah.
They're 2-0-0 at home. And they've got, 2 losses or shootout losses on the road there. So it's a little bit of a mixed bag, and very clear that, there's work to be done here. But I think the early signs are good. And if they can maintain the scoring at least, and then just kind of shore up defensively as they move forward, I think, they could surprise people.
How about the Montreal Canadiens, switching gears to the Eastern Conference, 4-1 and looking pretty darn good?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, Cole Caulfield alone is worth the price of admission on that team. But Lane Hudson as well. I would say, obviously signing that team-friendly contract recently is probably a boost to that team in a lot of ways. Just they extended the contracts of all the management, and it's very clear that this team has been built from the ground up, just deliberately and in a way to have a rebuild that progresses each and every season. And, for me, they were a team this year that I picked to make the playoffs and, maybe win around here because they just have all the pieces and they're also young. And I think that there's a lot of, well, why not us with this team? And, again, they're getting the scoring early on that they need. And I think this is a team that understands, where they are in their process, and they're not going to get bogged down by, the ebbs and flows of the season. They're just going to be like, yeah, we know we can do it. And we just on to the next one.
How about the Detroit Red Wings? 3 straight wins. They are 3-1 on the season, and this is a team that people were very divided about before the campaign got underway.
Yeah, I agree. And I think I just didn't know what to make of Detroit because this Iser plan has been going on for what seems like decades at this point.
Feels that way.
And it does feel that way. And you're just like, well, they've been sort of okay, this is maybe our year to take a step forward, and then they don't. And it's been a disappointment. And I think that there's just this attitude with them right now that's saying, okay, come on, like this is it. Like this is where the rubber meets the road, so to speak. And if we don't take that significant step forward this year, there's going to be some big changes. And so I just think there's a sense of urgency with that team that maybe hasn't quite been there in the last couple of years.
Yeah, let's see if they can keep that up. Now, over in the Central Division, all 8 teams are 500 or better, but the Predators and the Blackhawks kind of off to better starts than people expected. Not outstanding, but 2-1-2 for Nashville, 2-2-1 for Chicago. And Chicago has a +4 goal differential.
Yeah, I regret to inform y'all that the Chicago Blackhawks are fun. And like, I have not said that in a long time. And I, as a Flyers media person and longtime fan, of course, I have some deep-seated trauma related to the Chicago Blackhawks. But that being said, I think that it is a good thing when Chicago is good in the league. And I think that we're starting to see more hints of it, that there's a system that's working there, that it's not just Connor Bedard in a vacuum, right?
Yeah, and you need to you get that generational talent or that young star, but you need to surround that player with enough quality teammates to win consistently. I think they're not there yet, but it looks like there are some signs that they are taking the next step.
Yeah, I think so. And again, they're faster than they've been in a while, just in general. Like I've watched a game and a half of theirs so far this season, and especially in that game against the Blues, like it was fun, and I really like that for Chicago.
Yeah, no doubt. The Boston Bruins won their first 3 games. Now they've lost 2 in a row, but I don't think many people had them over 500 even at this early stage.
No, but I do think like the Bruins are going to settle into where they are. Everybody, this is the one team for me that's showing like, okay, this is kind of what we expect of them. They're going to like get some wins that people don't expect along the way, but the Bruins are what they are this season. And I feel like they will settle into that.
Tampa Bay Lightning off to a disappointing start. Is this just a slow start or is this a problem?
I think it's interesting because a lot was made of them in the preseason, especially with the multiple melees against their in-state rivals in Florida that went down, and that this was the Tampa Bay Lightning trying to assert themselves like almost like cats in the jungle kind of thing, which is like, pun intended with the Florida Panthers. But I think it just this thing where they put so much energy into their preseason that like the slog of the regular season ahead, I think they have some missteps going on right now, but I think they'll be fine in the long run.
Are you concerned that the Ottawa Senators have a -9 goal differential after 5 games, tied for league worst?
Yes and no. I think, there's a lot of, obviously with Brady Tkachuk's injury and, now he's going to be out after the surgery. It's official, it's like 6 to 8 weeks at this point. And I think that they've just kind of been struggling to figure out how to reorganize their team in a little bit of ways. And so I think they'll figure it out and they'll be okay. But they've always had a little bit of a defensive struggle here, and that they were going to win by scoring a whole bunch of goals. And if they can't do that, that's where the problem comes in.
What do you make of the Penguins and the Rangers? They're both a little better than maybe some people thought they were, but I mean, no one had the Penguins over 500.
Well, let's talk about the fact that this early in the season, where nobody's played more than 6 games, that the Penguins and Rangers have played each other twice.
Yes.
So, and negated each other in that process. And as we know, the New York Rangers are struggling mightily at home. They have not won a game at home, and I know they hadn't scored at home for a while as well either. So that was a problem. And so I think this is more of an early season situation thing. But I think for the Rangers, as we know, like this is a team that's for the last several years have been good on paper and just not been able to bear that out on the ice, or did well in the regular season and then just collapsed in the playoffs. So there's definitely some inconsistency issues there, and the Penguins are playing with house money. So why not?
Why not? Columbus 1-3, winless in their 2 home games. I mean, people were divided as to whether Columbus would be a playoff team or not. They were kind of somewhere in that 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th range on many forecasts in the Eastern Conference. How concerned are you over their slow start?
I'm not at all. I think that this is a young team, and again, early goings. I would not be concerned about them at all. I think they're building a process. They're building a system here, and I do think they have the pieces where it'll come together. Are they the greatest team this year? No. But I think they're a team that's going to do better than they did last year. And I'm looking for, especially like Adam Fantilli and Charlie Coyle, to be a huge part of that as kind of their middle 6 centers. And I think, as the season progresses, we'll see the chemistry start to build. Like Fantilli and Cole Sillinger, I think, have a lot of potential as a duo on that team. And so I'm really looking forward to seeing, how they grow as a team this year.
Should be interesting. I know a lot of critics said some of their success last year was due to emotion. We'll see, whether or not that pans out. So a lot of surprises early, but it is still early. But we've got some really outstanding games to discuss coming up this weekend. We're going to talk about that and more next on today's Locked On NHL podcast. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel has an offer that you don't want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and you'll get $300 in bonus bets if that first $5 bet wins. That's right. Pick a bet, put down $5, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love how FanDuel gives me so many ways to play. I've built parlays to increase my odds. I've tried player props, and I've even followed the live lines during games. It makes watching footballs even more exciting when you've got a little something riding on the action. So whether you're a casual fan or you love diving into the stats, FanDuel makes the game day experience so much better. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started. Again, place that first $5 bet, and if it wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Visit FanDuel.com to get started today. So we got a full weekend here. We're sort of, as you said at the top of the show, settling into the groove of the new season. What's the first game that catches your eye this weekend?
Well, of course, I would say based on, some of the teams we've talked about, I would really like to watch the Seattle Kraken at the Toronto Maple Leafs. Now, I know we didn't talk about the Leafs specifically, but I think this is a really good test for the Kraken to see where they're at, and especially test that blue line, right?
Yeah, you're certainly going up against some really good offensive players in the Maple Leafs. And, we have to see how the Kraken handle it. And then, the fact that this is a hockey night in Canada kind of a game, I think that always has an effect on some of the players, especially the Canadian-born ones.
Oh, absolutely. I try not to make too much of that because ultimately these guys are pros going in and doing their thing. I think one of the other interesting aspects of this early goings in the season for this matchup is that the Kraken power play is at 25%, where the Leafs are only at 10% so far in their power play. And that's, that seems backwards to me, right? So I think that is going to be huge. And I think if Seattle gets power play opportunities, are they going to be able to capitalize on them against this Leafs team? I think possibly the Leafs penalty kill is 86.7% right now, which is good, but not unbeatable.
So it sets up a very interesting special teams matchup, the game within the game. We'll keep an eye on that one. What's the next game that catches your eye?
So we talked about the Boston Bruins, and are they, going to win some more games than people think, or are they just settling into what their regular season is going to look like? And facing the Colorado Avalanche on Saturday is a really good indication of that, right?
Oh, yeah. Avalanche have yet to lose in regulation. We didn't include them in our surprise teams because everyone expected them to be a really good team. But right now, they seem to be hitting on all cylinders.
Oh, for sure. And so I think that is where, that matchup comes into play of are the Boston Bruins like really going to surprise people this season? And like I said, I don't think they will, but I also think this is a really good opportunity for the Avalanche here to just earn some points. And they have the game at home, they have the altitude advantage, but both teams' power plays have been pretty even on the season thus far. They're both excellent face-off teams, right? And so there's a lot of things that kind of knock up against each other. And I think, the physicality of the Bruins is going to come into play here. So I think it'll be a fun game to watch.
It should be. It should be. And we'll see if the Bruins get the goaltending they need as well. And they have a back-to-back. They play again on Sunday. So they got to figure out how to best utilize their goaltenders on this road trip. And how about one more game that stands out in your mind?
Well, on Sunday, we have the Oilers at the Red Wings. And I think, we talked about Detroit, like, oh, is this the year? Right. Yep. And I feel like, again, Lucy with the football with this team in a lot of ways, but much like the New Jersey Devils, I would say. But with Detroit, I think facing an offensive, force like the Edmonton Oilers, I think will be a really good test of what their defensive structure looks like, and if they can actually maintain the scoring pace.
Yeah, that will be the challenge. And I will say this, keep an eye in this game on Evan Bouchard. He was dreadful against the New York Islanders on Thursday night. It was a -3, gave the puck away, probably had one of his worst defensive games in a while. And not that he's known for his defense, but how will he respond after playing such a poor game? And how will the Oilers as a team respond after losing to the Islanders, who had been winless up until that time?
Yeah, and that response is a really good point about this game, is that, the Oilers do not enjoy losing to what they see as inferior teams and tend to react well to that. I do think, for the Oilers, obviously stopping DeBrincat is going to be a huge part of that. And can they do that from a defensive perspective? And then, as we know, the Oilers goaltending is always in question here, but I think that this will be a good litmus test for the Red Wings.
Absolutely. Well, it should be a fun weekend of games. Those are the three we're keeping an eye on primarily, and it's great to have hockey back all the way in full time. Season is in the flow of things. I want to thank you for making Locked On NHL your first listen today. For your second listen, check out the all-new Locked On NHL Game Night. Every game, every night until the Stanley Cup champion is crowned. Get local analysis on a national scale. You could find NHL Game Night on Locked On NHL on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Rachel, I know you'll be back tomorrow with Erica El Ayala for the Women's Hockey Spotlight. I will be back on Monday interviewing 3 of our local hosts about the biggest stories from around the NHL. And here on Locked On NHL, we're here 6 days a week bringing you the biggest stories from the hockey world. Have a great weekend, everybody. Stay safe, and thanks for listening to and watching the Locked On NHL Podcast.